Mr. Rangle?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Snyder? Mr. Swan? And Ms. Wigington?
We have a quorum present, and I'll call the meeting to order. And we have several guests this morning, both from the city and otherwise. Let me ask you if you would to stand and introduce yourself, to where everybody will know who's here, please. Mayor, I'm Mr. Mayor Gary Chesney is with us this morning. We're always honored to have the mayor and the other city folks.
Joey Barnard, Assistant City Administrator.
Tony Cox, City Administrator.
Steve Nielsen, Planning Director.
They're good, and Jay Moneyhan with Bassberry is going to be, has done some work for us, which he will be presenting this morning. Shannon Greene, who has a project here that's involved, and then the press. Okay. You want to introduce, you can stand up and introduce.
Okay, Wayne D. Smith, County Commissioner.
Glad to have you.
I'm Gwen Hogan, just a taxpayer.
Ready?
Yeah.
When did you start playing?
When I got old enough to go to work.
Something worked really
I'm
well.
Linda Noe, taxpayer, I guess.
You have the agenda in front of you, and the first item on the agenda is the approval of the summarization of a meeting that we had on April 14th. This is in front of you, and give you just a minute to look at that. And then the chair will entertain a motion for approval of the summarization of the minutes of the meeting on October 14th.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the minutes reflect that the board reviewed the summarization.
You've heard the motion.
Second.
And Guy Campbell, second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of it saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. And the motion's carried unanimous. The next item on the agenda this morning is the consideration and approval of recommendation of sale of property in the East Tennessee Valley Industrial District to Orbit Industries, and that's this sheet that you have in front of you here. I'll ask Marshall to review that with us, please.
So this is part of a property that is enclosed by Orbit Industries as part of the ETVID park and was formerly Shelby Williams. What you're seeing here circled is actually an open ditch. The company has plans to pave that over and make that parking. The ditch doesn't go anywhere, so but currently it is in possession or ownership of the city. We would make the recommendation to council to sell that property to Orbit Industries. We've told them, you know, I've estimated it what you see. I've got a computer program that shows it about a quarter acre. So we'd ask for $10,000 an acre, so it would be approximately $2,500. But the final price will kind of be determined once we have a better survey. So we would make the recommendation to sell that approximately quarter acre at a cost of $10,000 per acre to come out to whatever the survey amounts to. So estimated roughly though $2,500 to the city.
You heard the motion, recommendation. Mr. Marshall, is the chair will entertain a motion for approval?
Make a motion.
Mr. Heiss moved, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Ruggill, second. And let me discuss that with you just a minute. Obviously, Marshall doesn't know what that is. When we developed the East Tennessee Valley Industrial District back in year '01, right about the time the Confederates were out there, I think, that was a part of the ditch. And the reason I'm bringing up this question is the city. I'm asking really a question if the city has investigated that, because I know what has happened over the years. And I want to show you that this little ditch that we're selling here, it's an interesting phenomenon. This little ditch went all the way this way and was the main drainage ditch for the East East Tennessee Valley Industrial District, and it went to the main ditch right here. Now, obviously, when Shelby Williams, years ago, wanted to build over that, we apparently closed the ditch, and we apparently sold that land to Shelby Williams at that time. Why we didn't sell the back part, I don't know, but we didn't. And Tony, have you looked into that?
Yeah, we would ask that they would do a study of the area to make sure if there's any drainage requirements served by that ditch, they continue to do so with the pipe. That would be one of the conditions of the sale. But I think you're right, I think it does not carry water. I don't think it'll be a difficult thing to resolve. But we'd ask
And I'm
the-
not sure there wasn't a pipe that replaced that open ditch that run along there. Do you have any thoughts about that? You're gonna do the study to make
No,
sure?
we're gonna ask them to pay for the studies if they would acquire the property and make parking. But we do believe that there's been a ditch that, or a pipe that replaces that ditch, and it's elsewhere on the site.
Any other comments about it?
You say it's on their side?
Yes, I believe that there is one of the problem pipes we've been dealing with is the one that replaced the ditch.
See, this was long before Marshall got here. This was back in the dark ages. Do you have any comments about it?
Well, this again predates me, but I think I recall, Jack, that during transition between Shelby and, who was it, Falcon Industries or something, that they may have actually put that pipe across through there. And I think it's maybe just to the east, right here in that parking area is where that pipe may be.
It came down between what was General
General
Electric
Electric, yeah.
at that particular time, and the other Shelby Williams property. And actually, that drainage ditch originally went all the way to the railroad up there by what's now the,
It went up to Fomax.
wet one,
Yeah.
place.
What's Iatric now?
Huh?
What is now Iatric, that's
Yeah,
correct.
and the only thing, I'm not objecting to selling the property, and I think the motion's all right, subject to, the city making sure that we have no additional drainage problems in that area. Does anybody object to that?
It's our intent to put that burden on the buyer to assure that they study that and build whatever drainage is necessary.
And can we make a note on the motion, that before the board, that the city is going to do that, please, to make sure. We don't want to create any environmental problems of water coming out of the back end of the park up there. And trust me, I know that ditch was put there, and I know when it was put there, and I know why it was put there. Okay.
Call for the question.
Question's been called for, call order, Madam Secretary, all in favor, let it know by saying aye, all opposed, no.
Mr. Heiss?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Ramsey?
Yes.
Mr. Rangel?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Snyder?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell? Mr. Crane?
Yes.
And Mr. Fishman?
Aye, it's unanimous and so ordered. The next item on the agenda is consideration of approval of amendments to the protective covenants of the East Tennessee Progress Center. And that you have those covenants in front of you, and you have outlined in yellow on there the amendments of what we either want to take out or put in that particular amendment to the covenant of the park. This basically comes about because in these are the East Tennessee Progress Center on I-81. And these covenants essentially, each time we've done a district, an industrial district, we've tried to come up with the covenants that we felt were timely at the time. And this is really a clarification of what we expect insofar as the East Tennessee Development Progress Center is concerned. We didn't have this as a part of, it was left out in the beginning that we want to record these in the Jefferson County Registrar's Office, because parts of that park are in there. And the other change really has to do with the clarification of the siding that we want to require to maintain some uniformity of all the parks. Are there any questions about those?
Mr. Chairman, I found it, and it may be standard language, B7, no structure hazardous to moving aircraft shall penetrate. Looks like that's been copied from the Morristown Airport Industrial District
So that's,
restrictions.
that's correct, but that part of that park lies within the 5-mile zone of the airport, so we have to keep that in there.
Have to keep it in
Yeah,
there.
there's a
Okay.
piece in Jefferson City that gets
Ooh,
that
there,
5-mile circle. Yeah, because we thought the same thing, and then we talked to the city,
Got it.
and they noted that, so yeah, we'll leave it.
So the chair will entertain, any further questions?
Move that the amendments or revisions be approved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Smith moves, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Horn, second. Any further discussion? Jack, you look like you had a question. Did you have?
No, I was gonna
Okay.
say.
All those in favor, let it know, of the motion, let it know by saying aye, as your name's called, all opposed, no. Call roll, Madam Secretary.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Snyder?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell? Mr. Crane?
Yes.
Mr. Fishman?
Yes?
Mr. Heiss?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Ramsey?
Yes.
And Mr. Rangel?
Yes. Now, Mr. Seward, the next item on your agenda is a resolution pertaining to payment of in lieu of taxes to the Industrial Board of the City of Morristown for what was Howmat Castings and Service. It's the property located at 5650 Commerce Boulevard in the Morristown Airport Industrial District, where extensive construction has been underway for some time. Marshall, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'll talk about it, then I'll let the paid staff handle it. This project between both facilities will be over 300 jobs and 135 million investment. So it's a pretty big project. As you know, we approved this back in early 2018. So what happens now, based on state law, and Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, we make the formal approval early on, and then once the final documents are done, we have to bring those again a second time to the board, and you approve the final documents, of which we approved sometimes years past. So it's just a formality that we go through and approve this, but I'll let Jay give you any details of each, because I think we have to approve each of them separately.
Sure. Yeah, I think the one that Mr. Fishman referenced first was the expansion to the main plan at 5650 Commerce Boulevard. They're adding on to that plant and investing quite a bit in new equipment for that expansion. And so the terms that this qualified for under the board's policies is a 5-year 75% abatement on both equipment and real property. The equipment that's being abated is just the equipment related to the new expansion, not existing equipment. And the portion of the real property that's being abated is just the expansion, not the entire existing facility. And so under a pilot, as you may recall, that equipment and the real property is conveyed to the IDB, at which point the property becomes exempt from tax, and the board leases the property back to Howmet, the iconic entity, and they agree to make a payment in lieu of tax. And that so actually, as to the underlying land in the existing facility, they're agreeing to make a payment in lieu of tax equal to 100% of what the taxes would otherwise be as to that portion. But as to the expansion, the building expansion, that'll be assessed and that will receive the 75% abatement. And then as well as just the equipment related to that expansion is conveyed to the IDB and leased back. And so it's just the portion of the expansion that's being abated. I believe they've already purchased quite a bit of equipment this year, about $10 million in equipment, so that'll be covered under this pilot. They have about 30-something million next year, and a little bit left over in 2020. So they'll be able to convey the expansion-related equipment over the next 3 years, and they'll get 5 years as to each equipment year as to that. But as to the building expansion, they'll just get 5 total years.
What's the total investment on the equipment you're talking about?
I have down, it looks like about 40 to 45 million in equipment just for this piece of the pilot, the expansion, and then, you know, some more investment as to the actual expansion of the building.
This could be 75 million, maybe,
Probably.
before it's over.
Yeah, 50 to 75.
That's a lot of jack, folks. It's on a corner of the industrial park down there. And I hope you know what those folks do, because if any of you fly airplanes, commercial airlines, you're probably flying, it's got a jet engine on it, those propellers, if you will, in the jet engine are the things that make that jet engine go away. The mold from making those was made in Morristown, Tennessee. And if it cracks, you'll crack up.
So each piece of equipment is a 5-year, 75% abatement as of the date it's purchased. The real estate is 5 years also at 75, but just on the expansion piece.
Yes, sir.
Did I hear that correct?
Yes, sir. And then so there's 2 resolutions. The first resolution is as to this pilot, and that approves the lease that incorporates the terms that we just described. So that would be, I guess, the first motion to consider is the pilot, the resolution related to this facility. And then we can, after
The
that.
5650?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
you've heard the
Second.
motion, by Mr. Smith, second by Mr. Crane, and this is on the resolution before you, 56, we'll just call it the 5650 Commerce Boulevard property, because we'll come along in a minute, and their expansion at 1447 Farmers Parkway will be a separate resolution. And you've heard the motion. The floor is open for questions or discussion. Anyone have any questions? If not, call over, Madam Secretary. All those say aye. If you agree, and all opposed, no.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Snyder?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell? Mr. Crane?
Yes.
Mr. Fishman?
Yes?
Mr. Heiss?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Ramsey?
Yes.
And Mr. Rangel?
Yes. It's unanimous and so ordered, and now we'll move to the next resolution, for, Almet, at the 1477 Progress Parkway. That's out in the, out on the I-81 interstate, project. You wanna talk about that?
Sure. This is their compounding building, and they're investing about $7.5 million just in equipment related to this project. That qualifies for a 4-year, 75% abatement just as to the equipment. They've invested, they plan to, by the end of this calendar year, they'll have about $7 million of that equipment purchased, and then next year they'll finish out the investment of another $500,000 to get up to the total investment. So this pilot would allow them to, you know, as the the equipment acquired this year, the 4 years would start beginning with next tax year, and then as to the equipment acquired next year, they would get 4 years from next year, 75% abatement. And again, this just covers equipment, so no real property is transferred to the board. It's just the equipment that's conveyed to the board and leased back to Almet under our pilot lease that's before you in our typical form.
Motion for approval.
Mr. Crane moves the approval of resolution concerning equipment at 1477 Progress Parkway that you have in front of you. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Riddle, second. All floor is open for discussion. Anybody have any questions?
Call for the question.
Question's been called for. All those in favor, let it know by saying aye. As your name's called, all opposed, no. Call roll, Madam Secretary.
Mr. Crane?
Aye.
Mr. Fishman?
Aye.
Mr. Heiss?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Ramsey?
Yes.
Mr. Rangle?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Snyder? Yes. And Dr. Campbell?
Unanimous, so ordered. The next item on the agenda this morning is consideration of approval of amendment, the Merchants Greene Tax Increment TIF, financing documents. And let me, indicate to you, and then I'm gonna call on Jay, Maria Shannon is here, to discuss the development of the Merchants Greene property. I had dinner last night at Texas Roadhouse, sure was good. This project has really changed basically that end of town, and like all projects of this nature that involve many, many things, what has happened is, whether, I don't know who's at fault, but whatever the case may be, but certain things have not been done on the site, of which we've had a meeting with Shannon, and he agrees to do in short order. If you want to talk about that in a minute, you can. Basically, when you do a TIF, you come up with a plan of how it's to develop. Well, everything needs to work well, but in a massive project like this, it's sometimes impossible to get all the sidewalks down when you haven't got the grading done in a particular part of it, and that may cause some erosion of that problem, which creates problems for that. Finishing the paving of the roads is another issue that we have had there. And then probably the big issue is getting the main road, the interstate connector from the AJ Highway all the way to exit 4 built and opened through there, and you just don't want to hear the nightmare about it, but there was a sinkhole that opened up on the highway right past the interstate there, that they tried to fix X number of years ago. It fell in, it didn't work. They've come back and tried to fix it again. It fell in, it didn't work. And so the state of Tennessee that's in charge of building that interstate connector down there has had considerable problems. You say, well, how does that affect Merchant Greene? Well, it affects Merchant Greene because Shannon has prospects for certain pieces of property down there, and they say, well, when is the state going to finish the road? And he said, well, they said the summer of 2017. Well, they come back and ask in the winter of 2018 what happened. Well, the road fell in again. So this is going on and on to the point of certainly one of irritation for Shannon, irritation for the industrial board, irritation for the bank, and irritation for the city, because very frankly, for the 2 or 3 years that they've delayed, if you want to be brutally frank about it, if you study these kind of things, the city has lost several $1 million in sales tax because we haven't been able to get done what we need to get done. Now, in the process of all that, the grading contractor went bankrupt, and we sent them a check, I think we'd sent them a check, type thing, and these requests for payments come to the city and the industrial board, and we've got to be able to justify the work has been done before we can pay it. We can't just pay it when it hasn't been done. Well, all that comes about, and then somebody wakes up one morning and says, this project expired in December of 17. And so then everybody goes crazy. And so we've had a meeting to discuss this in detail with the parties involved. And with that introduction to it, the city has been very cooperative. Shannon's been very cooperative. We still haven't got the road open, but we even made an inquiry of the Tennessee Department of Transportation of how Mr. Baylock is doing in getting the road fixed and open down there. And the latest thing is he's got 30 trucks hauling chips or shell. They're putting shell in, if you go out there and look at it now, rather than dirt. Apparently the dirt washed away, and now they're putting rock. Maybe it won't move, I don't know. Mr. Corley may want to talk about that engineering part of it, but the present timeline of getting the road open from AJ Highway to Exit 4 is next summer at the present time. They indicate that they're working at it rather regularly. The 30 trucks that I saw were two trucks. So I don't understand that from 30 to 2, but nevertheless, that's a big issue there. Well, that and one of the contractors, the grading contractor, that was supposed to be doing work is no longer in business, and that's a complication. So all of that boils down to what we need to do in short order is, I think all of the parties, I may be wrong, I thought this one was a funny one. If you've eaten at Arby's and you try to come out of there and you come onto that 4-lane, 6-lane highway right below the bridge, I want you to hold your breath because there's supposed to be a red light there. There's no red light there yet. Well, you say, why don't we just put up the red light? Well, the state's got to approve the red light. And then you say, well, why don't you approve the red light? And then the state says, well, we're not sure what the traffic's going to be because the road's not open. And so you say, well, if you got the number for the transportation department, and it's a real war out there of helping Shannon do the development that he wants. The city can't approve what they need to approve because Shannon can't complete what he needs to prove. But the main issue, I think, is we need to extend the TIF type thing. And Jay, I'm going to call on you if I've said something that's wrong, or you can. You wouldn't be the first lawyer to tell me I was wrong. Go ahead.
That was a really good introduction. Thought I might go through a little bit of the history of this TIF and kind of TIFs in general. There's two basic economic development tools that the IDB can use to incentivize projects. We just talked about the Howmet. That's a pilot. That's just straight up tax abatement. The other, primary local economic development tool is a tax increment financing, a TIF. And in a TIF, the incremental taxes that are generated from a project are distributed back to the IDB on a for a specific period of time, and it allows the IDB to borrow up front to grant those funds to a developer to assist in the development of a project. And so that's what happens here. A TIF has to be approved by both the city and the county originally. This TIF was approved by the city and the county in 2015 for this project. They approved total amount of the TIF that's available was a maximum of $4.6 million, and the incremental taxes that are generated from any parcel within the development are subject to allocation to support the TIF for a 10-year period as to each parcel as they develop. So originally in 2015, we closed the financing with Tri-Summit Bank, which is now Home Trust Bank. And the IDB is the borrower under that transaction. Tri-Summit Bank agreed to lend up to $4.6 million based on incremental taxes, but they were not willing to disperse all $4.6 million. They were only willing to make disbursements as the development proceeded along and as the new improvements went on the tax rolls, and they could see exactly what their incremental taxes were going to be for the 10-year period as to each piece, so they could tell, okay, you know, say a new parcel is developed and it'll generate $10,000 of incremental taxes each year, and we get that for 10 years. So that's over a 10-year period, $100,000 over that period. Well, the bank looks at that and says, okay, $100,000 over 10 years. You know, when you factor in interest that's payable each year, say that's, you know, we'll lend you $80,000, you know, based on that. And so, based on the development that has occurred so far and the incremental taxes that have been generated, there have been 2 draws from the bank totaling about $1.4 million. Based on the development that's occurred to date, the bank says, hey, we're willing to lend an additional $355,000 because the incremental taxes from the current development supports that amount. If there's future development and it goes on the tax rolls, we'll be willing to disperse more. But as of right now, we're willing to lend $355,000 in another draw. That money has to be used for eligible expenses. It can't be used for any development costs. It has to be used for what's called public infrastructure under the TIF statute, and that includes roads, traffic signals, sidewalks, any improvements that are on publicly owned land. It also can be used to reimburse for certain costs that are on privately owned land. And the costs that can be reimbursed on privately owned land include parking, so any grading, asphalt, any parking related costs, and also stormwater and utilities that are located on privately owned land. So when a draw is taken by the IDB is the borrower, but the IDB entered into a development agreement with the developer in 2015 when this TIF closed, and the IDB said, developer, we will agree to reimburse you for eligible costs from the proceeds that we borrow from the bank, so long as you complete certain development requirements. And those development requirements were set out in the 2015 development agreement, and those were to be completed by 2018. They had a 3-year period to complete those certain development activities. That deadline has come and gone, and there's certain things that have not been completed due to a lot of the reasons that Jack discussed. The road hasn't been completed. One of the contractors has gone bankrupt, and so there's certain things that haven't been completed. We have met. We've got input from the city as to the things that the city believes need to be completed from a safety perspective, and the primary things at this point that one, we need to amend the motion that's before you is to amend the development agreement. We have to amend the original development requirements and give more time to the developer if we're going to permit further draws on this TIF. And so we've gone back, looked at those requirements, and we've set out a new schedule that's the very last page on this first modification of TIF documents that sets out the things that we'd like to see done now in order to approve this next draw. and again, this is from getting input from the city and the relevant parties. The primary, originally, I guess the first thing is kind of easy. Number one, under the development activities, there are 2 right-in, right-out dividers that are within the development that need to be completed as a raised concrete median. There's one at the intersection of Erica Greene Circle and Merchants Green Boulevard. There's another at the intersection of Evan Greene Plaza and West Andrew Johnson Highway. In talking with them, it doesn't seem like that's a very difficult thing to get completed. And if this amendment is approved and the draw is taken, then the deadline for completing that will be 45 days after the amendment is entered into and the draw is taken. The other 2 items are 2 traffic signals. One that the city believes is needed pretty soon to handle the current traffic. That's the light to go at the Aubreys, which is at the intersection of Merchants Green Boulevard and Evan Greene Plaza. And the proposed deadline there is 6 months after this modification would be entered into and the draw would be taken. The third item is another traffic signal. This may be the one that Jack referenced, but this one is one that probably, won't, although it'd be nice to have now. We talked with the developer and I think worked out what they thought was reasonable to have that done within 6 months after the road's completed that runs to the interstate, but in no event after June 30 of 2022. And then there's development activity number 4, improvement of Howell Road. This is a requirement that plans have been submitted, approved. There's a bond for it, but this is one that the developer or the contractor, don't bankrupt and hasn't completed this. The city has a bond for certain aspects of this to be completed, and so they're working through all the details on that to get that completed, and having to hit the bond if they need to. And then items 5 and 6 are just carryovers from the original development agreement, just kind of general requirements that stormwater improvements be made to handle the stormwater, and that other roads and sidewalks are completed as needed to coincide with the development. The main other modifications to the TIF that were required, the bank originally in 2015 only said, hey, we'll lend you up to $4.6 million as this goes along, but after 2 years, our commitment's over. So in order to permit this next draw, the bank needs to say, hey, we're still willing to give this money. They, at least in their commitment letter, said we're willing to extend it for a 3-year, the draw period for another 3 years. So this amends the loan documents to permit the draw period to extend for that long. The original loan agreement also, the bank said, we're only gonna, don't come to us for a draw if it's less than $800,000. This one's obviously, the proposed new draw is $355,000, so we need to reduce the minimum draw amount, so that is taken care of here. And then the only other modification is the section 4, and this is when the draw is taken, say it's $355,000, as to development items 1 and 2, the traffic dividers in that first light, the amounts would be drawn by the IDB and would be released to pay, transaction costs, our costs for working through this, and for other eligible development costs, but they would hold back the amount necessary to complete the median, which I think is around $5,000 until it was completed or until a bond was posted to ensure completion of it, and the same with the traffic signal. And with that, certainly if anyone has any questions as to how the document's drafted or how the modification works or the TIF works, or if anyone has, or Shannon, if you'd like to say anything, or if anyone has questions for Shannon.
So the initial development period ran from when to when?
The initial development agreement was executed in March 18, 2015, and it required certain public infrastructure to be completed within a 3-year period, so March of 2018.
March of twenty
Right,
eighteen.
and a lot of it's been done, but certain aspects like these 2 lights and certain other items that have been, have plans submitted and bonds that just haven't been completed due to the contractor going bankrupt.
And I guess these things that are on Exhibit A are the items that the city required for the development plan of the whole development. Maybe with the exception of, I guess since it's a state highway, the erection of another traffic light on West AJ, which seems interesting in itself.
Yeah.
And at one point, I kind of thought in my mind that from West Andrew Johnson Highway to exit 4 was gonna allow for a free flow of traffic out through there without lights, but obviously I was mistaken. Somebody shake their head and say, I was mistaken, or what?
I think the lights were in the original plan, whether they were where you thought they were.
They were?
Yeah.
Okay.
They were in the development agreement.
That they were in the, so yes. So the answer to my question is, these things that are listed out here, basically Shannon agreed to when he signed the original documents. But what you're saying is, due to circumstances beyond everybody's control, none of which of leads is the sinkhole on 160, which, yeah, I can see a little bit of that. But by the same token, the other piece from 160 back to West SJ has been flowing pretty freely since that period of time. So, and then the other piece of it is the issue you had with your contractor. And did I understand that there is a bond in place that would cover item number 4?
That's correct.
Okay. And I think Mr. Mooneyham said that currently the city is working, so you're making a draw on the bond, and
We've called the bond, we're negotiating that issue.
I got you. Is that with a bank or an insurance company, or
It's an insurance company.
insurance company? Okay. So what you'll do is take the funds and have the work done to the extent it'll cover it, and the extent it won't cover it
Goes back to the developer.
goes back to the developer, okay?
Let me again summarize and say that what we're
I don't think that's necessary,
What
Mr.
we're
Chairman.
asking the board to approve this morning, basically, essentially doesn't modify the original plan. It extends the time
It's time, yes.
of the TIF. Now, to do that, there's certain things, very frankly, that I think are very important, and I think everybody, Shannon, the city, the bank, I think everybody is in agreement that Shannon could just walk away and say, I'm not gonna do it unless you give me my money. The city can say to hell with you, we want it done yesterday or some kind of thing. But you've got a plan, you've got the budget, and everybody, I can tell you, we've met, we've discussed it. Shannon's in agreement, the city, Shannon's gotta follow the rules, the city's got the plan. We need the time for whatever reason that we're in to do. And some of it may have been the fact that we didn't get a development done when we thought we were going to get it done, because the developer says, I'm not gonna spend X million dollars down there when I don't know that you can get there. And so you got all those problems. But I think, as far as the board is concerned, I think, and if anybody wants to speak to this, Shannon or the city or whoever, and we've had Jay meet with us to make sure that everybody understands what we're doing. And then it came, well, we can't do anything unless we extend the date. And so, that's the purpose of why we're here. We're not here to change the plan.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, again, just a couple of other questions, all right? So, the modification and extension will extend the development period another 3 years, or how long?
It will require him to complete these items, within the
With the
time
schedule.
set forth here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it would permit, it would permit him to request the 355,000 draw.
Of
and
which
it
a
would-
certain portion of it would be held back to cure
Right.
items 2 and 3, or whatever
Right,
those
right.
are, yeah.
And then he's required to complete the remaining items under the development agreement, like the second traffic light within that time period. But there's no, there's no other criteria, a lot of these are just kind of general, other than the second traffic light and the completion of the Howell Road improvements. There's no other big items, that he has another 3 years to complete. However, if he doesn't do these items within the time period, he, again, and wants to come back in another year to request another draw, he will, if he's not in compliance with these time
Be in
periods, then
default.
he won't be able to do it unless we give him another extension, or unless he's complied with these requirements.
Is the city, somebody from the city look at me and shake their head, yes or no? Is the city in agreement with this?
Our original request was that the escrow covered both traffic signals, and that is not what's reflected in the document for you today.
Okay. Well, I find it curious to think we need another traffic light on West Andrew Johnson Highway, particularly when you got one so close, but that's, I understand.
Steve, do you have any recent traffic studies, or what does traffic studies say there?
When you say recent, we received one for potential waggles that's looking to go in, and it says with the increase in traffic flow, especially with 66, that a signal will be needed there for left-hand turn movements out.
But not at the moment.
Well, since there's not a story.
All right, so let me go back and rephrase. This is like the jury, except you're not under. So, the proposed modification and extension with the timetable, the city's okay with it.
Right, the request that the first signal be installed within 6 months of the agreement, and the second will be installed within 6 months of opening the road.
Okay. All right. Do we have anything from Home Trust? Have you talked with them? Were they in agreement with it?
Yeah, they've said, for a little while, we're willing to fund another $355,000. We had to amend the two little minor things as to their agreement as far as the draw period and the minimum disbursement amount. But the last time I talked with them, and I have a commitment letter from them saying they were on board, if this is approved today, I'll have to send the document to them for their
I get
final
you.
approval.
So the whole TIF maturity will be extended 10 years from the date of this, or how does that work?
No, the maturity will stay the same.
The original maturity.
Right, correct. He, under the original agreement, he has, with respect to any parcel, we're entitled to 10 years of incremental taxes. But that first year, as each parcel, he has 10 years to do it. So 2015 was the first year. So, this covers development that may occur all the way through 2024, the 10th or 25, whatever it is, 10 years. And so that the last parcel the 10 years of that parcel can commence that day and go to
It goes 10 years
2035.
from that.
Right.
Okay.
But this doesn't do anything with respect to the original, the length of the TIF or
Right.
how long incremental tax.
So really the important date is kind of, it's the way I see it, it's the development phase of it.
Correct.
How long he's got to get the infrastructure in and all that good kind of stuff.
And I should say,
All right, state for us what we're exactly being asked to approve.
okay. And before I do that, I just want to say, we can, if the board would like and wants to require escrow of the cost of the second traffic light, we can certainly make that change and, for approval. that, because that time, they have additional time to do that, it would extend that out, and the TIF funds would be drawn and would be accruing interest while it's sitting there, but that certainly is it's possible to structure it that way. I don't wanna, if the city desires that and the board wants to do that, we can amend that to do it that way. I don't wanna, there's options, but as drafted, Tony's exactly right. It only requires escrow of the
So
first.
we're only considering the as drafted.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
someone can make a motion, but yes, if you're asking what the resolution and what this specific draft is, the resolution would authorize the chairman to execute this modification that's before you, and you can certainly make, if you wanna say, hey, we want this changed before we make the motion, you can do that, but, that would be, the resolution in front of you is to authorize the chairman to sign this modification.
All right, good. Mr. Chairman, I so move.
You heard the motion that, to approve the extension of the TIF and, the schedules that are before you there. And you've heard the discussion. Chair, is there a second?
Second.
Does
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman, does the modifications that are included in all this satisfy Shannon?
You know, I'm not willing to put a red light up today that's not necessary. State of Tennessee did a study for me. It says red light's not needed until we get the road open. And so, you're trying to make them put a red light up within 6 months. The red light's not needed until you get the road open and you create the extra traffic. I don't know why the city's stuck on me putting a red light up on Merchants Green like Andy said. Yes, one day it'll be needed, but, what I just heard you just say, I don't think I understood that. You're gonna escrow $160,000 till I put a red light up? I mean, I think that's kind of crazy. Some of the things that you got here are pretty simple. If you go down and look at the site, I've got the site pretty much complete. There's some things left to do, but the things you got left to do, you can't go install storm drain until you get a tenant, because exactly where I put that storm drain will be, maybe where he builds a building. So there's very little left to do, but, I don't know that I'm on board with putting a red light up the next 6 months, or let the city, tell me that, we're gonna escrow half your money. Well, that's crazy. I've created a lot of stuff down there. I've worked really hard, and I feel like that I need some help here. Did I anticipate the state lying to me? Not really. I get asked every week, hey, when's that road open? I give the same answer, 6 years ago. That's what I was told, but, heck, it's untelling. They may open next year, but like Jack said earlier, you go out there, they tell you got 30 trucks running. I go out there and they might be 1, might be 2.
No, it's 2.
Or 2, so I don't see it. So as far as putting red lights up, that ain't gonna happen, not in the next 6 months, because they're not needed. I mean, we don't have the traffic there. Steve's talking about that little curb. Well, that curb ain't nothing. The curb that he's talking about, those 2 on number 1, they weren't on my original drawings that I got approved anyway. It's just something that, hey, it looks good, we'll put one in. Okay, well, I'll go put that in. That's not a big deal. Not a big deal. I'm really trying to do the best I can with what I got to work with. Andy knows about this, probably been forever, so, anyway.
Any other questions? Any other statements?
We need to acknowledge, everybody knows what
Yeah,
a
address the
value
chair with
this,
questions, would you? Address the chair, we're not here to
no
debate the whole
comments.
thing. Well, you got to go to where we are.
Let's call for the question.
Well, I forgot a second. I got a second.
Mr. Rank.
Okay, question's been called for. All those in favor of the amendment, let it know by saying aye as your name call. This is the first modification of the TIF documents for Merchants Green. If you're in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. Call the roll, Madam Secretary.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Snyder?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell? Mr. Crane?
Aye.
Mr. Fishman?
Aye.
Mr. Heiss?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Ramsey?
No.
And Mr. Rangel?
Yes.
Is there any other, business to come before the board?
Move for adjournment.
Been moved to adjourn, is there a second?
I got it.